Now we're going to jump to the next segment, and I don't know about you, but I think that at least in my vision, the future would look a bit boring if we didn't also add culture. And this segment is the segment that we're moving into now. And here to introduce this segment is Linnea. I think you're there, Linnea Evågen Svensson. She's the project manager and co-author of the Nordic Green Roadmap. Hi.
And thank you so much, Åsa, and thank you so much for sharing that meditation. It's good to be hopeful. And now I will introduce someone to you that I hope will inspire you, because we need inspiration for the future. So my name is Linnea Svensson. I have been the project manager of the Nordic Green Roadmap for Cultural Institutions, and I will share more about that in a little bit. But first, I would love to introduce my friend and colleague, Louise Lindén, who is welcome up on stage. She's an activist and social entrepreneur, and I hope she will share some more of the future and inspiration for you. Welcome, Louise. Thank you.
Hear me? No? No? Yes? Yes? Okay, great. Thank you. So happy to be here. I'm very sorry for destroying the beautiful vision of a sustainable future with this. I'm supposed to have a pep talk, but I wanted to say first that I find it a bit difficult to have a pep talk right now about sustainability, because we see this everywhere. And every time I see this kind of dystopian, horrible headlines and reports, I try to remind myself that actually, according to recent study, the majority of the people on this earth wants to see climate action. And second of all, we are in the middle of a big transformation, even if it goes slow and it might not always feel like it. So, when I was 18, I was struck by this typical teenage climate anxiety. And my reaction, my way of coping with this, was to quit school and start a music festival, which many grown-ups thought was a very big mistake, because kids are supposed to go to school and get good grades and all. But this happened to be the best mistake of my life, because I had this festival for 8 years. I engaged hundreds of young people in my hometown, and festival-driven transformation is still my job today. So it was a very good mistake by an 18-year-old kid. So why a festival? Well, we have all the facts. We know that we are in a critical situation and we need to make big changes. We don't need more facts and evidence for this. What we need now is action and engagement, right? We need to tell new stories of the transformation we are facing. We need to talk to people's hearts, not only their brain, and we need creativity and imagination. So, I will give you 5 reasons to why the cultural sector has a key role to play in a large-scale sustainable transformation. And let's start with the fact that a festival is kind of a mirror of society. It's a temporary city where we have similar challenges. We have fossil fuel addictions, we have waste management, we have sexism, inequalities, and so on, which makes them a perfect playground for sustainable innovation and new ideas. We can use this place to prototype a different future. And we can try, for example, circular innovation, communication, and art, as you can see on these photos. We can also experiment with green energy, like Coachella's Energy Playground, or maybe some of you have heard about Coldplay's groundbreaking tour, where they actually had kinetic dance floors and bicycles that transformed the audience movements into energy. We can also introduce the food of tomorrow, like we did at Way Out West Festival this summer, where the visitors got to taste 3D printed meat, and meanwhile, experts studied the different attitudes and behaviors of people. So we can see festivals as a living lab to gain data and try things before we upscale the solutions in the real world. So that's number one. Also, there are actually research from Gothenburg University showing that when we visit events, we are more open-minded and curious than usual, and we are more inclined to change traditional behaviors and norms, which is very interesting. And one of the events that the researchers looked at was Way Out West. 2012, they became one of the first all-vegetarian festivals. And they decided actually not to communicate this because they thought people bought tickets for a music program, not a food menu. But this little secret leaked to the press just a few days before the festival. And what happened? Well, people got furious for a little while. And then they went to the festival and they ate the food, and yeah, it was kind of okay. And from year to year, the protests were smaller, and this festival stayed vegetarian. And what can we learn from this? Well, new ideas are always radical the first time we try them, right? But then after just a few years, they can become a norm. Today it's not a strange thing if an event or festival decides to be vegetarian, but back 2012, not a long time ago, this was a very radical idea. And the result from this, as the researchers saw, was that 15% of the audience actually changed their diet permanently after the festival. So they brought this new attitude and behavior back home. Amazing, I think. That was Way Out West, but what do we do at a festival like this? Sweden Rock. That doesn't consist of this young hipster audience as Way Out West, but tens of thousands of middle-aged tattooed men who love beer, meat, and motorcycles. What do we do here? We have to think in a different way, of course. We have to think hållbar hårdrock, sustainable hard rock. So we need to find the kind of actions and communication that relates to this crowd. And we have to make sustainability become like an interesting part of their lifestyle and their identity and their culture. I bet that the hard rock fans would love insects, right? Yeah. So really, really think creatively. And that's the third reason, because cultural passions, they are very, very close to our heart and our identity, and we can really challenge this. This is a researcher at Chalmers, Martin Hultman. He's been studying a lot around ecological masculinity, climate denialism, and so on. And he has identified 3 mechanisms that are like in the way of people embracing this transformation. The first one is economic interests. Like, I make money from business as usual, and therefore I want to protect it. The second one is ideology, like connected to our political and philosophical view of the world. And the third one is identity. What's close to my heart? What do I really care about? And what do I don't want to lose? And this is really good to keep in mind when we work with transformation, because we need to understand the psychology of those we need to bring on board, because we need to bring everyone on board. Number 4, artists. They have a unique position in power because they have not only the attention of thousands or even millions of fans, they also have their engagement and trust. So what they do and say, it really matters. We can see that over and over again. And this was the main insight that made Fridays for Future to the global climate justice movement to reach out to the music industry 2021, because they thought, we have been striking for 4 years now, and we need more people to care about climate justice and to put pressure on the political leaders to act, and maybe artists and concert can help us with this. So what happens when you let young climate activists organize a music concert? Well, one of the things that did happen was this. I just wanna Andreas Magnusson. Yeah, so when everyone thought that Andreas and Greta would have an angry speech, they surprised everyone with a Rickroll. You all know what a Rickroll is? It's when someone surprises you by playing Rick Astley's "Never Gonna Give You Up" when you least expect it, and it's an internet thing. Yeah, I don't understand it, but this little stunt actually became. It was a very good idea because media across the world loved this, of course, and covered it. And Rick Astley also celebrated you on his Instagram. So sometimes it's also good to bring in the unexpected. In this case, young activists, and let go of the control. If you're working with youth, you should really let them, be in charge, because I would never have this idea. This was your idea, totally. And more importantly, this was the start of Climate Live in Sweden. And since then, we have seen some of the biggest stars, among them Håkan Hellström, for example, First Aid Kit, Lars Winnerbäck, use their platforms to promote climate justice and speak to their fans and talk about system change and a different future. And that's really, really important. It matters a lot. And just the other week, we received actually funding, 6 million from Allmänna arvsfonden, to work with artists and fans in a long-term way to create a bigger movement for climate justice. And last but not least, we can tell stories of a radical, sustainable future. And we need that. The creative sector is experts when it comes to telling stories and make us understand and envision a future. Many scientists talk about the fact that we are not only in a climate crisis, but also imagination crisis. And we need to practice this skill to imagine a different future. But today, most of the stories about the future are like this, right? They're dystopian. We fuck everything up. Like there's a virus that wipes out all of humanity, or we have to colonize different planets, or as in Handmaid's Tale, we fix the climate, but only by oppressing people and tearing down our democracy. And we need other stories, right? We need to tell the story that we do this transformation, and we will fix it and we will have a better future, because that's the truth. If we let go of these unsustainable behaviors and systems, we will have a better future also for us. So let me finish this with some music. Actually, the music from Annika Norlin that made Greta Thunberg start becoming curious of the climate in the first place.
Vi möttes uppe i luften över Atlanten. Myror och isbjörnar, palmerna och jag. Gud, jag kände mig fånig. Hade trott att jag var mer viktig än havet. När oljan slutar rinna, stannar bilarna. Flygen föll rakt ner och många strök väl med. Och en växt som var någon slags ledare pekar framåt och så ner mot Washington, Washington.
The power of music. Thank you.
Tack. Thank you, Louise. How do you feel now after meditating? Do you feel a bit inspired? Do you think? Yeah. So in order to create change, we need to believe and we need to hope, and we have to feel connected to each other. And we think that through this work, reaching out with culture and connecting people in experiences, this is a way to change, because we have to stop doing something. We have to change our behaviors. Do you agree? Thank you. So, I've been working in sustainability and culture for more than 20 years. I sometimes get the question, Are you still doing the same thing? Well, it's still needed, and of course it's not exactly the same thing as in 2002 when I started doing organic food on a festival in Norway. So this is the Nordic Green Roadmap for cultural institutions. Why do you think we decided on, in the whole experience sector, on cultural institutions? Well, they receive a lot of public funding, right? So it means when the rest of the society are connected to the taxonomy and the EU Green Deal, nobody at the moment are really asking that many questions about the money that leads into the cultural institutions. So for us in the team working behind the roadmap, for us it was logical that that's a way to start working in a pan-Nordic system. So my colleague Ingrid Smerup Sørensen, who regretfully could not join us today, I know she's online, so I'm waving to you, hope you feel well. And also the steering committee consisting of people representing all of the Nordic region with Gunn Hernes, who's up on the balcony. Oh, you're there! Representing the Nordic House in the Faroe Islands, but also connected to Iceland and Greenland. Tapio Sekinen from the Finnish National Opera and Ballet. Karin Karlsson from Malmö Live. Nina Hodneland og Åsa Kringstad from Norwegian Cultural Sector, and Jakob Teilgaard from Kulturens Analyseinstitut in Denmark. So we wanted to inspire and support cultural institutions in this change and making other choices. So we assembled this set of actionable recommendations, but also a map. So it's all about, this is Johan Röksum explaining how everything is growing all the time. We need to grow creativity and not consumption in the same way we have done. So as a part of the whole program of sustainable living, this was connected to the project of cultural experiences, and there has been other actions in this program as well, but I will talk about the roadmap solely. So this is the roadmap as in a timeline that we are looking into, because we are having international goals about cutting emissions by 2030 and 50. And here are 9 steps that we identified in the green transition. And it's about giving somebody a role and actually mandate to take care of it, because we all know what happens when nobody's in charge and, you know, cleaning the kitchen or putting their dirty laundry in the laundry room or actually cleaning the laundry. Somebody has to be in charge, just as at home or in your life. And we all have to be in charge of this, of course, but it helps when somebody has the mandate. Then, of course, we need the strategies, we need the goals, we need to assess what we are doing, we need an action plan, and so on. You get the drift, right? This is the index and the topics that we are discussing. We are going into action points on green transition strategies, energy and water. We heard some examples today. Materials and waste, the Swan label has given us important input on this chapter. We heard some examples earlier today, as well as within materials and waste and food and beverage. Travel and transport are also important areas when transporting a lot of audience, for instance, but also artists. digital carbon footprint, also looking into carbon calculations and carbon credits, because we need some extra help to achieve the goal when cutting as much as possible. But although this is a mostly green roadmap, we are also looking into the community part of it. So in the energy and water roadmap, a part of the roadmap, we are giving action points, input, but also some background information on how to rig this in your cultural house. Are there any cultural institutions here at the moment running the house? Not that many. So what we see is that funding is mostly given to maybe an exhibition or setting up a play, but it's not given to run actually the house. So the practical details. So when I say it doesn't help if it's raining through the roof, if you have million-kroner lights hanging to light your exhibition or your play. And I often hear people say, yes, it's raining through our roof. And just understanding how we can also invest in these, in the framework of the culture, that's important. And a lot of money to be saved, of course, that can be used instead of paying electricity bills, to be paying artists and cultural workers. Materials and waste, just understanding how we can be circular instead of just consuming endlessly and just throwing things away. We have to assess this and think about the materials being used. Food and beverage, for many, this is maybe the most important area. For some, it's not. So we are investigating a bit about this area. We had this wonderful panel about this topic already. Travel and transport is often connected to the audience, but being situated in often cities as well, there are other transport measures to be taken with the suppliers, but also the artists that you use and activate. In the digital carbon footprint, we don't really think about this often. So we decided to add this as a chapter because we all have a digital footprint. And this means just going into streamlining and optimizing your web page, because they use a lot of energy. Deleting your emails. Do you think about that? Who deletes their emails regularly? Ooh, are you Swedes? Is this like a Swede? Yeah, this woman did this. But also revise your whole life cycle on the devices. How often do you update your hardware? I know that some institutions do this every second year, although the hardware is still functioning and you don't really need it, but you have a budget, and if you don't use it within the year, it will be taken away from you. So you have to buy new things constantly. And that's not, I think, the best way of consuming and using public funding. So revising and reviewing this purchasing politics. Just using a bit of time on this, but also minimizing and borrowing and renting instead of buying. And for the carbon calculations, we looked into several different types. This is just a bit of what's out there, and it's like a forest almost like. But we've been looking into a Nordic tool called Green Producers Club and tool. And just to give you an example, it's specially developed for the experience sector. And here you see a typical event carbon calculations. And it shows that the scope 1, which is the direct emissions, are normally quite low. The energy, the scope 2, is quite low. And the scope 3 is the rest. The indirect emissions are the highest, And this is why cultural engagements is really important, because you have to engage your whole value chain. You have to activate and see how you can make sure that this is a way of reducing your emissions. And it can look like this. This is a calculation. So we're talking a lot about assessing, and this is about putting things into systems that also makes it possible to share. So this is a great tool for that. Then it's a bit of a hard area to discuss, because I've been against carbon credits always. You can't pay yourself out of it. It's greenwashing, right? But after being through a process, I see that when we have measured and cut as much as possible, we also have to put economy into reducing and remove and save our emissions. And there is another project going on this area in the Nordics as well. So we need to develop policies that are clear and understandable in this area, so we are able to engage in the whole innovation of this and to make it fair and transparent, right? And to the last chapter in community, we are all a part of this together, unfortunately, or how you look at it, and looking into how we can cooperate in this and how to make it fair and including and safe for everyone. We are discussing this a bit too. So, before I introduce the two last speakers, I just want to share some to-do lists, because many ask me, what can I do? And yes, you can start by starting, but first you have to acknowledge that you should change something. Do you see that? Before you can start doing anything, you have to just internalize that you have to change. You can't continue doing the same thing. So a friend of mine just put the oat milk in front of the normal milk at the bar earlier, and it was tidied back in the back afterwards again. But I think it's about changing our habits, changing some things, and maybe being a bit of like underground actionists sometimes. So I think onboarding the right competences early enough in the process, and also always having this as a part of the whole production, how you run your institution or project from the start. And it doesn't have to be one person in charge of that being a satellite, and like it can be everyone's kind of focus. It does not have to be one person. It should be a part of everybody's role. So also very practical, you can change to rechargeable batteries. Do we have rechargeable batteries in the mics? Yay, thumbs up. Technical people, yay. And also to check that you have a complete inventory of all of your electronic equipment. Do you have that? Yes, very good. You have tidies, and also tidy and make systems of your belongings. You do that too? Maybe? Not sure, okay. So great, we can have a dialogue about this. But good for us to know they have this they are in charge. They have taken this seriously. And also, if you offer food, make sure that there are vegan or vegetarian options on the top of your menu, and that they are tasty. Make updates of the purchasing policy. We have talked about this earlier. I don't know if the Swan label people are still here, but it's amazing tools. Hello. Amazing tools. Check their webpage. It's a very good way to navigate in all of this. If you know it's a Swan labeled product, it's the best choice. So you don't have to be an expert. yourself. Consider also making a no-go list and analyze what is hard or easy and start with the easy, because there are barriers. And just realizing what your barriers are is also very helpful. So by this, thank you for your attention. Frida, are you ready? So next on stage is a practical person who actually works with this full time. You're a climate coordinator at Riksteatern.
Yeah, National Touring Theatre of Sweden.
And just, yes, thank you.
Thank you.
And before we switch, we will just have this as your resting page, because you don't have a PowerPoint.
No.
You are presenting like this.
Yep.
And while she's talking, you can actually download the roadmap on the QR code. So thank you, Frida, for coming and sharing.
And thank you for the roadmap. So as you might imagine, I'm quite alone in Sweden. Well, our cultural institutions, there are not many climate or environmental coordinators employed. So I am super happy whenever it comes a new roadmap or a new network or something happens within our fields. So you might think like culture, we are front runners, we are great at innovation, problem solvers, we are really creativity, you know, everything. But, you know, we are still institutions. So sometimes things can take a little while, especially when it comes to changing how we do art. We are great at making art, we are great at telling stories, and I think also the art sector as a whole, we are responding to the climate crisis, we are telling stories, we are showing pictures, we are making art, manifests, we are activists. It's great, but then when we are institutions or we are bigger theaters, we are also just a normal working place, a normal organization or a company, and we have to do all these boring things as well as hey, IT department, can we make our IT last longer? Do we have to change it every third year? Is it really that big of a security risk to have this new IT things all the time? We also have to have a travel policy, even though, just as you researchers, I know this is an issue with you too, our stuff is so very important, so we have to fly and meet and see each other's art. So this is an issue that the entire cultural sector, and especially maybe stage art, also have to talk about, like how do we change how we meet, how do we talk about what is collaboration, because at least at Riksteatern or the National Touring Theatre, flights are one of our biggest emissions. So of course we have to work with that when we want to tell stories about the climate and the environment. We have to be a sustainable organization. And of course we have to do this for the climate, but if you now, I don't know, sit there at home or here thinking, well, but I'm a cultural institution and I'm not really doing much, then you really have to, because it's not only about the environment. Well, that's the main, we want to survive. It's a crisis, we have to act now, but it's also about being relevant to our stakeholders. Artists that come to Riksteatern now, they may be actors or scenographers or well, anything, directors, people are engaged. We want to work sustainable. No one wants to harm the planet during work hours or at home. So it's very natural that we do something. So I'm not saying that Riksteatern is best. We have a lot of challenges that we are working on, but at least we have started. And for us, it started back in 2016 by people being employed at Riksteatern, being frustrated, but also we were looking at sponsorships and companies were asking, but we need to have some sort of sustainable policies or something, some kind of proof that you are working with environment. So that is why Riksteatern created a policy on how to reduce our climate impact. And it's basically to follow the same goal as Sweden as a whole. So we want to reach climate neutrality by 2045, which of course we cannot do alone. We need the society to change with us, but we can do a lot of things, the same as any institution can. We can talk to our stakeholders, we can talk to everyone we buy things from. We can try to buy less stuff and use more reused stuff. So a comment to the triangle you saw here before. I've been really trying to look into what's the most sustainable fabric, what's the most sustainable wood or glue or whatever. And of course, there is bad and less bad things to choose from, but to really not take anything more from our earth is the most sustainable thing. And that is also something you can measure. How much reuse did we use in this production or in this art exhibition? So that is a great thing, a little tip. So Riksteatern, we were also a little bit hesitant on looking into climate because we are a touring theatre. And we also have some international assignments that we have to collaborate and tour in the world, and we want artists to come to us. So we were worried about that. And yes, it is a big thing, but we also spread culture all over Sweden. And I don't know if you know, but Riksteatern, we are not a government institution. We are actually owned by 250 associations across Sweden, and they were also the ones. And I will also, those 250 associations have over 40,000 members or around that, and they were the ones voted that we should have this climate strategy. So it's very well rooted in the organization that this is something that we should work with. Yeah, so when it comes to travels, it's very sensitive. It's the same as in the society. I was at a show yesterday called Omställningsont, the pain of, what's the English word for omställning? Of transition. And yeah, it was a climate activist there who had an amazing picture. She was dressed out as death, saying, "I'm the climate activist. I'm here to take your car and your flights." And that's how it feels sometimes. Like even just implementing a travel policy, saying like you should not go by train. If you can be there during a working day, like 8 hours, you take the train, don't fly. It's simple, but people can still be like, but I want to fly. So I think this is something that everyone can recognize. And I think also as cultural institutions or people working in culture, we sometimes think that we are different, but we are not. We are just normal organization, and as such we have to have people like me or consultants who come in and look at us and assess us and tell us what we can do better. And that's why it's so great with roadmaps and other things. Do you want to add something, Linnea, or questions?
No, just really loved how you share how you actually internalize this and put this into action. And I think it's different stories into this and different ways, paths into this for everyone.
Yeah, it really is. And I also it's a subject you never get done. There is always something new to learn on how to solve things best. But I'm also really happy to see that at least in the field of theater, a lot of things are happening right now.
And you also share. And
yeah, we share and we talk, and Yeah, so that's really, really good news that the art, even how we create art and how we create stage art, it's changing towards the more sustainable. But we do have a long way to go to be like at the 2045 goal, of course.
Yeah.
And also, I forgot, I'm really happy at the roadmap. There's an introduction to the action points that really describes why it is important to work with waste management or why it is important to look at the materials, which I think is really useful because not even if people know, it's still really good to be reminded and put your own little work into the bigger picture.
I'm very happy to hear that. Thank you so
yes,
much for
thank
sharing,
you.
Frida. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
So, for the last part of our session, we will meet Dr. Solveig Korum. She's head of climate and youth work, or senior advisor in this area at the Norwegian Kulturtanken. And she has also been in the project group of the whole program, so the program group. So, Dr. Solveig Korum, please come on stage. You did do a PhD, you don't? She hides her doctor title, so I just wanted to promote
no,
that.
you publicly broadcasted it very well. Thank you.
And you will kind of close this off a bit for us. What is going on now, and what is going on with the policies?
Yes.
Yeah, thank you.
That's the dry part of the session. Maybe you've been given so much inspiration from so many beautiful people. And here I am, the bureaucrat and the researcher, trying to give you like a concise summary of the policy part of it. Okay, so this is the topic where I will start out. Actually, I will talk about two things. I will talk about integrating cultural policy and practice into sustainability, and then at the end, there will be the other way around, how sustainability can be integrated into cultural policy. But this is where I will start. There is a lot of evidence, both lived evidence but also research evidence on how culture is fundamental to achieving sustainable development. We have heard a lot about climate action today through culture, but in many other fields there is also a lot of impact on all the sustainability goals by culture. And the newly developed document from the UN called Pact for the Future, it underscores the culture as a vital pillar of the sustainable development. And this is kind of for the first time. There has been some playing in the, like behind the scenes to try to get culture as a goal in itself. But this is kind of the first time that the public documents and the processes in the UN states how cultural shapes individual and collective identities, contributes to social cohesion, environmental responsibility, and inclusive economic growth. There is also another UN document by UNESCO some years back who launched a quite useful document called the Culture 2030 Indicator Suite, which kind of breaks down in details and based on various sources of statistics, different ways that culture contributes to each of the goals. And this is just a very kind of broad overview document. It was a systematic research review conducted by Sheng and others a few years ago that shows the how cultural influences the different goals of sustainable development. I will not spend too much time on this, but if you look at the different colors, the orange, which you can actually see a lot of, marks where there is scientific evidence that culture influences the goal achievement. And the blue marks cases where culture is developed through goal achievement, and in the gray boxes there is a lack of proven correlations in existing research. So you cannot really see. So this is kind of, this gives just a broad overview. And according to this framework, cultural contributions to sustainability can be understood in many ways, and I will go into sorry, I stopped. Okay, I will, because all these colors and all the boxes and all that, it kind of talks about the cultural dimension. And the framework that I will now talk about, it breaks down the different ways of this cultural dimension into the sustainability work. And this first one, you can actually see the different dimensions. You have the social dimension, you have the economic dimension, you have the climate dimension, but this framework also suggests that you have a fourth dimension where culture is a sustainability element in itself. This points to the intrinsic value of art and culture and how it fundamentally enriches human lives in terms of promoting both individual and societal collective qualities like creativity, critical thinking, empathy, trust, and mutual respect. And art can also be a democratic eye-opener in this respect, that it kind of, in itself, it enhances societal participation. And this is especially important in the area where I work with children and youth. And then the second one is kind of art and cultural sector in the middle, and how it kind of can enlighten or work as a glue for all these other areas. It can contextualize, it can reveal connections, it can contribute to innovation in these other areas and bind it together and search for new solutions like Louise talked about in the festival that she has done. And in this last model, you see how culture is basically like encompasses all sectors of society and works as a cross-cutting goals, for example, through education and how it reinforces diversity and integration. So based on this kind of idea of how culture integrates and works into the broader sustainability agenda, I will now share a few recommendations on how this can be done on the policy level. Okay, so recommendation number 1 is basically that do not forget to invite the cultural sector to the table. This is the first time in a big project by the Nordic Council of Ministers that the cultural sector has been invited, both to sit in the steering group, but also to be part of like a broad overall cooperation with other sectors. And I really hope it will not be the last. When you see health, when you see education, food and agriculture sitting at the table, remember also to invite people from the ministries of culture and people who work in the field. It's very easy to deprioritize areas that don't show immediate results when crises grow larger and more frequent, like we see today. But just as you cannot build a solid wall without cement, or if you have a broken shoe, you have to put glue into it, culture is that glue that you need to bind and to make these other things happen. And then I will basically suggest 3 policy recommendations on how you can integrate sustainability into cultural policy and practice. And these are the areas that the project, but also kind of broader research shows that we can work along. The first one would be to reduce CO2 in arts and cultural sector in our operations, like it was talked about in the Nordic Green Roadmap. The other one would be to protect cultural heritage, cultural rights, and yeah, I will talk about that a little bit more soon, and then mobilize like Louise and others have talked about. So these are the 3 tracks, and I will just move shortly, but a little bit more deeper into each of the dimensions. To reduce CO2 in the cultural production, we need to, or we can, encourage eco-friendly touring, materials, energy-efficient technologies, welcome Linnea, like you talked about, reduce waste in cultural creations and events, institutions, and promote carbon neutrality in so many ways. And the other recommendation is something that hasn't really been highlighted today, but it's also a very, very important track. To protect cultural heritage helps retain traditional knowledge and sustainable practices that can promote eco-conscious behaviors today. Safeguarding cultural rights ensures equal access to cultural expression and fosters social sustainability. And in terms of this, each of the Nordic countries have signed several international conventions relevant to the protection of cultural heritage and cultural rights, for example, the UNESCO 1972 Convention, UNESCO 2003 Convention, and also the 2005 Convention on the protection and promotion of the diversity of cultural expressions. Yes, okay. But I will also like kind of to stress this last one actually, that the climate justice thing, that climate change has disproportionate impact on vulnerable societies, and it's especially important to safeguard the heritage and rights with regards to these vulnerable groups and to get their voices heard. And this one, last one, we have talked about, but we need to integrate it into policy as well. But I need to just emphasize that as policymakers, we shouldn't mess with the content of culture. That's the artist's roles, and we need to be at an arm's length distance of that. But we can facilitate grants, partnership, communication channels, and events to generate knowledge, raise awareness, and catalyze action for low-emission societies.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Solveig, for giving us a brief overview of all of the policies that are out there also coming towards us and what is going on in the international society. So by this, I hope you got inspired, that you got some tools, and that you now can go ahead and start acting even more than you already do. Thank you so much for your attention. Thank you.